am J. Rachel Edidin.
And I'm Miles Stokes.
And we're the hosts of Jay and Miles Explain the X-Men, a weekly podcast all about the ins, the outs, and the retcons of our very favorite superhero soap opera.
We're also the hosts of Jay and Miles Review the X-Men,
which you're watching right now,
where we talk about the X books that come out each week.
This week we are once again recording from Books with Pictures, Portland, Oregon's newest comic store, opening officially on June 1st. We've got one book. Let's go. Our one book this week is All New X-Men number 9. Written by Dennis Hopeless, penciled by Mark Bagley, inked by Andrew Hennessy, and colored by Nolan Woodard. So this is the first story of a new arc that takes us, or puts Evan Sabanor in the focus. It's technically part of the Apocalypse Wars tie-in, and it's really kind of our first time in the head of a character who's been around in the background in a supporting cast for years at this point, but never really a focal character until now.
Yeah, and I gotta say, already with one issue, Dennis Hopeless's take on Kid Apocalypse, on Genesis, on Evan Sabanor is, for me, the definitive one. The way he captures Evan's voice in this is perfect, basically.
Now, it's also a really interesting follow-up to what comes before, because what we've seen largely in this book, and what we've seen is as the focus in it has been teenage Cyclops, who is terrified of the idea and sort of the specter of his adult self. And what Evan's dealing with on that front kind of throws that into perspective, because, I mean, this is a kid who is afraid to have a bad day because what people see when he's in a bad mood is Apocalypse.
Right, arguably the most dangerous mutant-themed threat in the Marvel Universe pretty much ever. And the owner of the weirdest, coolest little robot fish lip setup going on, those are pretty great.
Honestly, I'm going to go ahead and say that Evan wears it better.
Yeah, probably. I would probably wear it pretty good. I could do it right along the edge of my beard, I'm thinking. Just trace it.
The other character who's front and center along for this adventure is Hank McCoy, Beast, who was again kind of the lead in the last issue, which was sort of a standalone. He is currently trying to find a way to get these kids back to their original time, which interestingly is actually established in this.
The 60s, they mentioned,
right,
yeah.
In ways that completely break chronology, which I sort of appreciate. Like, it gives them a solid date to come from, and it also just makes it clear that, time passes however it passes in Marvel.
I also appreciated that of the various time machines he was playing with, one of them was the baseball bat full of time travel crystals from that one Savage Land arc that we saw in Wolverine and the X-Men. That was a nice little touch.
That Wolverine's weird half-brother had.
That was so strange, yeah.
That was an odd arc.
But it's good stuff, and I mean, I don't know, so the framing story is Evan at his birthday party. He's turning, 15, 16?
16.
Yeah. And the way he interacts with that, putting on this smiling, brave face, but also making every excuse to get out of there, like, it's poignant. I mean, you mentioned this is the first time we really get into his head, and the fact that the first time we get into his head is him talking explicitly to, the audience about the fact that it's just a smile over a whole lot of, like, terror and doubt, that's some rough stuff.
Well, and that what he's homesick for, again, in the same sense as the displaced original 5, is a past he can't go back to in his case because it literally doesn't exist. He was raised in a place called the World, which
the source of quite a few cold opens.
The world is effectively a time-frozen bottle world, bottle setting. And Phantom X took this kid there and had him raised in this perfect, imaginary, idyllic Midwestern Kansas farm town, which isn't real.
Or rather, the town is, but his role in it is not. So he goes back home, and it's...
The town is modeled on a real town.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not a real place. And the real town it's modeled on is obviously not nearly the friendly, idyllic, bucolic setting that his childhood was.
Especially when you got weird robot fish lips and gray skin and you're stretchy.
So, I'm not gonna, it's pretty obvious what happens, because the Apocalypse Wars is all about time travel. And this one sees Evan and Hank shunted back in time to intersect with what appears to be the original form of Apocalypse as a teenager about Evan's age. Now, you've been reading the series that goes into Apocalypse's backstory from 96.
God help me, I have.
And you've got a different theory.
Okay, so my take. So Rise of Apocalypse was a series that came out in 96. It was set in ancient Egypt thousands of years ago, and it was about how Sabah Nur grew up from a baby to a giant robot High Lord who liked turning his hands into hammers.
So is it basically what you're saying is that it's like the Wonder Years Apocalypse?
Now I'm just imagining Fred Savage with the robot fish lips.
It's actually really, really easy to picture.
It kind of is, yeah. But that would imply to me, based on its chronology, that this is not Apocalypse. It might be his son who's the character that Beast and Evan meet. I don't know, it's unclear. There's a character that may be his sister. Sometimes she's colored with that weird gray skin. Other times she's not.
Well, it's at night, too, so there's desaturation happening around.
Right, so we'll see. It's ambiguous. I don't know if it's deliberately ambiguous. Honestly, like, if it is calling back to a forgotten 1996 miniseries, then it kind of doesn't matter too much. But for me, since I'm reading this right now, I'm desperate to figure out what's going on. So we'll see which of us is right. But that's a cool way to do it, because I mean, here we have En Sabanur, or possibly his son, at a point where he could go in any direction at the same time when Evan is concerned with exactly that for himself. So that's a really clever way of doing this, and already this is my favorite version of Apocalypse Wars.
It's very The Last Supper, isn't it?
You mean the movie where the
Yeah,
liberals
with the
kill the people
tomatoes.
and... How?
Well, you go back in time, you see the evil future demagogic dictator of the world as a vulnerable teenager.
Oh, yeah.
What do you do?
But see, for me, this is less, do we change history by killing/redeeming Apocalypse, and more, here is a parallel to me, how does this influence my view of myself? But again, we'll see. It's the first issue in an arc.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really good, though.
It is. It's really, really good. I would not recommend jumping on here for the first time, I will say. And a lot of that is just because this series has been really good so far, and reading the first 8 issues is something I'd recommend on its own anyway. Some of it, though, is that I think this builds on themes that are established really solidly in that, especially the first arc.
Yeah.
And you'll get more out of this if you're familiar with that. You'll be able to follow the story just fine jumping in now, but you'll lose some of the depth.
So speaking of Apocalypse, there's a movie coming up with that in the title. And we actually have seen it. We apparently are press, and so we got to go to a press screening.
It was Miles's first press screening. We are very proud of him. I was going to take first day of kindergarten pictures with a lunchbox and stuff of you.
Backpack.
But I forgot. Yeah. But no, you did very well.
Well, thank you.
I'm very proud.
So Jay actually wrote an extensive and spoiler-free review of X-Men Apocalypse. It's up at explainthexmen.com right now. I highly recommend checking that out, but I figured we could at least touch on it briefly here.
So, I mean, what it comes down to for me is that X-Men Apocalypse is an absolute mess of a movie, and I enjoyed the hell out of it.
Yeah, I mean, the way I was looking at it, it's almost like it's 3 or 4 pretty good to great movies, all kind of crammed together in a way that doesn't do any of them a whole lot of service. I mean, it's a movie full of awesome, fist in the air, I love being an X-Men fan moments. But as for whether it holds up as a cohesive whole, kinda.
That's a problem, or at least a state that has been really consistent in the X-Men franchise, even going back to the original trilogy. I mean, I'm thinking about The Last Stand, which is terrible but has great moments. Really, every movie since then, Days of Future Past, which again is messy but amazing and triumphant, and I
loved it.
I loved it too, but I also recognize that I am very much its target audience and that I am deeply invested in the X-Men and really, really love complex continuity.
True. But yeah, like I said, we're not going to go into it too much right here because that review is already up, but I do want to give a special shout out to the kids. Characters that play young Cyclops and Jean and Nightcrawler and Storm especially are just stellar. I don't know if the franchise is going to continue past this point. This is very much the last movie in a trilogy.
Well, a bunch of people are signed on for it, and if they haven't officially announced, then they've definitely teased at the next chapter.
Yeah. And so if that happens, I'm super excited to see these kids. Definitely the standout of the movie for me. The rest of it's got a lot of cool stuff, but with them, every moment I loved.
Yeah, I gotta say, and again, this is something I once I mentioned we'd been to a screening, this was the question I just got over and over and over and over and over again. So I went in really prepared to hate this version of Cyclops. If I am over-invested in X-Men, I am that much more over-invested in Cyclops, and everything I'd seen in promotional materials and interviews kind of had me suspecting that this was not going to be recognizably the character who I was there to see. I was mistaken. He is significantly different from previous iterations, although less so from the previous cinematic versions than you'd think, because same backstory, it just never came up in the movies before. And yeah, it's a really good take on the character, and Ty Sheridan absolutely sells it.
Totally.
Totally. Sunglasses of approval. I don't know. I don't have a seal of approval.
But anyway, if you're interested in hearing more about what we thought of it, check out the review, explainthexmen.com. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I'll drop a link below the video. So our pick of the week is pretty obviously All New X-Men number 9. Solid issue, great start to a new arc, great look at a character who's been pretty underserved before. What's our panel of the week?
Our panel of the week from All New X-Men number 9 is this one right here, and it's actually a full page, as you can see. And for me, what this is a panel/page that's just firing on all cylinders. I mean, the flow of the dialogue going down from megalomaniacal, robot-y High Lord Apocalypse down to an almost dispassionately unconfident Evan, and then Pickles just sort of being concerned, which normally we see Pickles like drinking beer instead. It works well, and just the contrast between Evan's face and between this very traditional, very 90s-tacular version of Apocalypse works beautifully. It illustrates what the issue has been telling us about Evan's psyche, about the conflicts he's having, in a way that only a superhero comic can. So, well done, that page. That's it for this week. Thanks for watching.
If you like what you've seen here, but think it would be way better without our faces, check out our podcast, Jay and Miles Explain the X-Men. New episodes go up every Sunday at explainthexmen.com, also on Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher. What have we got this week?
So this week is part 2 of 2 of the Madeline Pryor part of Inferno.
So sort of part 4 of 4.
Depending on how you look at it. But yeah, this is pretty much every X-Men and X-Factor plot thread of the last years and years of issues coming to a head. It's really good stuff. It's super emotional. There are lots of monsters everywhere. We can see Walter Simonson do some really cool stuff. So yeah, definitely give that a listen. Listen to the previous episode first because they go together very, very well. But check it out.
That podcast, these video reviews, and everything at explainthexmen.com are brought to you by our Patreon subscribers. We are an entirely listener-supported project, and those are the folks who let us stay on the air and ad-free. If you want to join their ranks, you can do that at the link either above or below this video, depending on where you're watching it.
In the meantime, we will see you next week, and watch out for apocalypses. Apparently they're everywhere. Everywhere.
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
Somewhere in the production of this movie, someone thought about Angel as a character and went, you know what? I'm going to commit 200% to Alex Winters in Lost Boys as this character's aesthetic. And they did. They ran with it. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of respect for that.